Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the next episode of StreamTime Sports. My name is Chris Stone. I'm the community lead, joined as always by our CEO, Nick Meacham. So, Nick, I am going to raise this again. This will now be the third season. I try to give it a few weeks to just let the algorithm work itself back out a little bit. But this is now the third season in a row, Nick. Since the baseball season has started, the Cincinnati Reds, I wake up every morning, and the first thing I do, because there's 162 games, is I watch the Reds highlights from the night before. And now for the third season in a row, every morning I get on YouTube, on my homepage, there's a set of highlights produced by the Major League Baseball. It's never the Cincinnati Reds. And I'm just trying to figure out, Nick, some people have like, oh, it's the algorithm trying to pull you into a rabbit hole to consume more content. And my thing is, Nick, either AI is not as smart as everyone makes it out to be. It's not stealing your job. Or can I be so stubborn that I can break the AI that wants me to watch content? So I'm figuring out what's going to happen first. Because I'm telling you, Nick, I'm not watching a highlight of another baseball team.
You know what? I'm kind of with you that the algorithm isn't as smart as people make it out to be, because I keep going on to, I just keep getting served the same stuff. So I have the problem where I keep getting served iterations of the same things all the time. It's the same with Spotify, where I'm like, they give me a new playlist to listen to. I'm like, those first 15 songs are songs I've listened to before. Can you give me something new? I'm giving you a little bit of trust here. Go find some new music for me that aligns with what I like, but not isn't something from the 1990s, trying to age myself a little bit here. And the same goes with YouTube. It just keeps serving me the same stuff. And the problem is then you're going to go discover what you want to watch next? That's what their job is. The algorithm's supposed to make that happen for you. And if you're watching all these Cincinnati Red videos, that's unfathomable. Can you watch them through? Can you find them perhaps through the Cincinnati Reds own channel? Does that exist? That maybe if you go through there, maybe it'll start feeding you that. But that's pretty mad that hasn't worked that out.
You know what? That's a decent shout, because it is the channel that I watch it through is the Major League Baseball channel. So maybe it just knows I watch that channel. It doesn't pick up that it's the Reds specifically, because there is a Bengals podcast. And I'm one of those people, Nick. I think you're one of those people too. I'll use air quotes for those listening to the podcast. I watch podcasts via YouTube, and I watch the same Bengals podcast every day. Now, I wonder, because that's the same channel, and that channel is always dedicated to the Bengals. I wonder, Nick, if maybe that's the thing, is a Major League Baseball's channel as opposed to the Reds channel. But still, I'd like to think like the algorithm should know, like it's explicitly the Reds every single time, even if it is on the a broader league channel.
Yeah, I'm skeptical, and I just don't quite understand how the YouTube stuff works. I know everyone universally basically praises TikTok's channels. I remember talking to a couple of people that people who are in their 40s and 50s saying, I had to delete TikTok. It was becoming too much, taking over my life. I'm like, wow, okay. But I don't hear the same thing for YouTube. YouTube's just a form of entertainment. I do remember speaking to a YouTube executive a few years ago, and they were one thing that's stuck with me ever since is, whenever you get an ad served, skip that ad as soon as possible. Because if you let it run for a few seconds, the next ads will be longer, and it'll be longer, and it'll be longer, because they make more money out of it, and they know that you're sort of willing to watch a longer video, which drives them more revenue. So I don't know, it doesn't feel as innovative as you think, but I'm sure there is some sort of logic to the madness as to why they wouldn't. But it makes no sense if you're a sports fan. If you're thinking just about a sports fan, it's a bit like it goes back to the thing we've talked about a few times, is around subscription approaches. My view, and I think we've discussed it, you've brought it up too as well, is if you're trying to sell a subscription service to, say, Major League Baseball, but you're a Reds fan, I don't really want to watch 90% of the rest of the games. Just give me a subscription to the team's channel, and I'd still pay you just as much, probably. Like, I don't think you're going to lose much revenue out of that mix. And the same goes here. Why can't they just make it happen? Make it happen, guys. Come on. We're an obvious test case here. If we aren't happy with, and we're pretty simple folk, I think, if you can't get it right for us, then it must be more complex. That being said, that YouTube's now worth $550 billion. So what do we know?
Well, one of the interesting things, not to go too off piece, but I think it's all connected. It's related. It's all about sports streaming. So we're staying in our lane, as the expression goes. You're talking about YouTube and sort of, extended ads, things like that. Well, I've been managed to be hooked up with a media pass for MLB TV. It's my parents' birthdays in the month of April, so I thought it was a nice present. I would get them a subscription to watch, and the folks at the MLB helped hook me up with that. One of the things I noticed with MLB TV and Major League Baseball is as guilty as the NFL is in the sense of lots of commercials because there's always an ad break between innings. On MLB TV, there's no ads. It's just content will resume. And I actually find it a less satisfying experience with just a holding screen being held up between the innings than I do. I would rather be served ads. So like, it's weird because like I just don't have a lot of experiences where I'm in that position. But I was like, I actually would rather have ads in this case. So like,
yes, Chris, I'm so with you on this. I remember watching. This is a bit more of a doomy and gloomy version. I think I don't know if I've talked about this one before, but when the Ukrainian war broke out, I started watching CNN because I wanted to get. So I had a connected TV. I was a Samsung TV with fast channels, and I put on the CNN channel and fast. Like they're going to be reliable, give me lots of probably really deep insight as to what's going on and following it as it was all breaking out. And it drove me mad. They had this same music and these like couple of different holding slides. I'm like, please just serve any sort of ads. Then I don't care. Give me anything. Just not. And the other one that grinds my gears is ESPN's ads. They have the same types of ads for their own content all the time because I think they might be serving a no ads sort of service of no like commercial partners because it's a cable service. I'm not sure, but I don't want to see the same ad over and over again. So just serve me lots of random crappy ads. I'm happier with that than just watching a frozen screen until the feed comes back. It's mad. Why can't they even have like static stats on the screen? Just a holding slide with I don't know if you've seen much. I know cricket's not your game, Chris, but I'm sure it's similar perhaps in baseball. In cricket, you have quite a detailed scorecard that's often shown in between overs that they used to show back in the day when I used to watch cricket a lot more. I don't really watch it as much these days. And so it'd have all the batsmen listed, it would how they got out, their scores, and maybe like the balls they faced and stuff. And they would show up pretty much every over, maybe who's bowling at the time. And there was just a nice way to like quick scene set before the first ball comes in, and it happened every over. And there's ad breaks in nearly after every over, right? So it's quite frequent. How does that not exist? How does there not like just a detailed scorecard, maybe a couple of slides that it flips? Yeah, we could absolutely solve everyone's problems in the industry and get way more fan engagement if they just listen to us.
Yeah, I mean, I watch enough sports. I can definitely do that. And to your point, baseball is like cricket. It's very statistically driven. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen someone manually keep score in baseball. I don't think it really happens anymore. Like, the scorecard is, I mean, you're drawing up all kinds of crazy things. You got to learn to do it. So like, yeah, even it'd be very simple. Like, oh, this was a 6-4-3 double play. This was this. Like, just a highlight of the inning before of any statistics you need to know. Like, it can be so easy, Nick.
Yeah, tell me. So just explain to me that how that baseball scoring works, because it's actually something that's a similar. I call it a phenomenon, a thing in cricket. So if you go in the UK, I don't know if you've ever been. Have you been to many cricket matches before? I think you've been a couple with us and
been to a few T20s. I've never been to a test match.
So there's you see the traditional folk. I don't know if that's the right way to describe some people. Like, there's all this older establishment like to sit in the corners of the longer form games, and they have massive score sheets. They're like huge. You know, if you're watching live, you can see or non-live, it's bigger than the screen, and they basically tick all the things off as they go, and that's sort of a way to keep themselves entertained in between balls and deliveries and so forth. And that's it's definitely a thing that people do. I'm not sure it's too much for the younger fans, but it's definitely an older thing. Is that similar? Is that basically what you do for baseball?
100%. It's not probably as large as yours because a test match, you don't need as much of a page. It's really kind of like in a notebook size, but you can, there's 3 boxes for balls, 2 boxes for strikes. Obviously, if they get to the 3rd or 4th one, they get that. You can keep track of outs. Every position in baseball has a number. So like I said, the 6-4-3 double play would be the shortstop's number 6, the second baseman's number 4, the first baseman's number 3. So it means it went to the shortstop, the second baseman to the first baseman. You can put things like FC for fielder's choice. You can put E for an error made by them. So yeah, like you can go and you can fill out the whole sheet, things like that. So I definitely think it is something more the baseball purist traditionalists do, but like absolutely, like it was a rite of passage growing up. As a team, you'd have to keep the books. If you were not up to bat, you would do it while the coaches were out on the field.
Well, I think we're aging ourselves a little bit here and talking about how we would fix you. We're sounding about we're about 75 years old, telling everyone how we're going to fix YouTube. That the old school ways of scoring sports is now out of date. And anyway, we probably ranted and raved around that enough we should get things moving.
We hope you're enjoying this episode of StreamTime Sports, but we at SportsPro are excited to announce that at the end of this month, we'll be welcoming over 1,000 top executives from across the industry to our flagship event, SportsPro Live, held here in London at the Kia Oval. Join us on the 29th and 30th of April as we explore the future of the sports industry across vital topics, including sponsorship, media, tech, and women's sports. Head to our website, live.sportspro.com, to check out the agendas, speakers, ticket options, and more. As a podcast listener, you can also enjoy 15% off your conference pass with the code POD15, that is POD15, at checkout. We'll see you there. Fine, we'll get things moving, and we'll start off with a story that we have been covering. We've been covering it from a few different angles, but it is one that we know will continue to have breaking news, and we'll cover it throughout the summer, and that's FIFA's Club World Cup. We've spoken previously about the bold ambitions of FIFA, trying to get $1 billion for completely untested, unproven product. They've hit that number with their partnership with DAZN. Whether or not we think that's maybe the best decision, that's still up for debate. And one of the things we did talk about at the time is we anticipated a lot of sub-licensing deals. It wasn't exclusive for DAZN. We've seen in the US, TNT Sports have, gotten a sub-licensing deal with DAZN to be able to cover that in the US. But in the UK, home of the Premier League, people get upset if you want to, arguably the most, popular sports league in the world, potentially, at least definitely in the world of soccer itself. And the two biggest free-to-air broadcasters, BBC and ITV, have basically come out and said, we will not be bidding for the FIFA Club World Cup, which for me, I think is significant, Nick, in the sense of new product, reaches paramount. I think one of the most interesting statistics is, in America, it's something like what, Nick? Usually about 85 to 90 of the most watch sports events or watch TV events or sports, and they're all free to air. And I think historically the UK is usually only about like 10 or 15 of the most watched sports are free to air. And they all tend to be when the World Cup is on or when the Euros are on. And that's when it's on the BBC or ITV, not Premier League games that are on Sky. So yeah, I think I imagine a deal will get sorted in the UK. It may still even be BBC or ITV, but I do think being on free to air for the inaugural Club World Cup is surely something that needs to happen.
It's an interesting storyline, mainly because they're actually coming out and saying they're not willing to bid and vie for it. And I've been trying to mull over why they would even come out with that sort of messaging. And my guess, and this is all a guess here, we like to guess and speculate here, this is what we do, is that they're being demanded to be paying a rights fee. And for anything that's unproven these days, those types of platforms just aren't really willing to put any serious money on the table. I do think there's probably a challenge with also from BBC's perspective on how visible another broadcaster will be, i.e. DAZN, because they'll be probably doing the lion's share of the broadcast production and have their brand. I'm guessing the deal would be ingesting or taking the production direct kind of from DAZN rather than like adding. The expectation wouldn't be to add all its own overlay of production, the BBC touch, let's say, to it, the extra hosts and everything on top. They would just be looking to take the feed fairly directly. It would be the proposition. And they're probably not comfortable with that. I think I have heard and seen that being an issue previously for the BBC when they've had other sort of sub-licensing deals come to the fore. So I think that could play a bit of a role there. And I just think fundamentally when it's unproven, unproven, which is the Club World Cup is, even as enticing it is, I can't think of a situation where in the last decade where BBC has acquired a set of rights for a fairly premium sports property, definitely without a media rights price tag attached to it. So it's surprising that the messaging has come out. I'm not really sure. Might just be some good reporting that's basically asked the right people the right questions, and they've actively said that. I haven't read the articles where it's come from originally, but that might be why that sort of message came out in the mainstream media in the UK. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see who ends up picking that up. Obviously, Channel 4 is still a very commercial organisation with a free-to-air reach available to it. And there's obviously your more traditional players like Warner Brothers Discovery and Sky Sports and alike that could still make a play for that mass reach side of things. So we'll have to wait and see.
Two things that are interesting for me, and we'll address them separately. One of them is, are we maybe getting to a point with which people are oversaturated? I know there's been a lot of talk, especially from the players, that the competition schedule is too much. Well, I also agree. The answer is yes. But I am just curious. People, they don't want this. There's already a very long domestic season for all of these clubs. There's all of UEFA's competitions. I know there's other similar cups in Germany and Spain and France, but the UK's also got the FA Cup and the EFL Cup. Like, there's just so much soccer. Does anyone really want to watch this? And I think there's also a little bit of broadcaster fatigue, being like, we already spend a lot of money on football. Like, I don't know if we need to spend more.
Well, let's talk about the BBC. I think it's worth talking about because I think it's probably an issue that other public service broadcasters do face in certain markets. I'm not sure at all of them. Now, BBC is fairly unique in its licensing approach, where everyone who lives in the UK, and I think the law is anyone who has a TV, which I'm not sure works anymore in this day and age, but basically you have to pay a licensing fee. So it's basically like an annual subscription or an annual fee to have the rights to access the BBC suite of content. Now, that's just over the years become under way more scrutiny as a result of the pressures that come from a consumer and pressure that comes to government and so forth. And so, therefore, what that's led to is a lot of scrutiny on the BBC itself on how they spend their money, particularly on content. They're very well known at making and creating lots of great content themselves. But the notion of paying a premium for live sports doesn't really fit in a bucket that appeals and appeases its bulk of audience who are having to pay a premium. And I think the message gets pretty difficult to swallow for many consumers to say, hey, I'm paying a licensing fee and that licensing fee is paying for a portion of those live rights. I don't want to watch the Club World Cup. Why am I having to pay? But I'm funding those rights when it's so clear and so visible when it's talked about what the rights values are. So as a result, I think they've had to really be strategic on where they're spending or not spending their money. There's obviously some rules in the UK, which I don't know if this exists in other markets, but there's basically a rule that's managed by Ofcom and the Ministry of Sports, Media and Culture, which is there's different types of live sporting events, right? So there's the crown jewel events, they're called, which is the FIFA World Cup, the UEFA, the Euro Championships, Wimbledon, the Grand National, FA Cup, and the Olympics. And that is, they have to be shown live and free to wear. So then it just becomes about who's going to take those rights, and they're only bidding against each other. Then there's another set which is purely for highlights, must be available free to wear, which I didn't even realize there was one just for highlights alone. But that includes Six Nations for the UK matches, cricket test matches, Ryder Cup, and the Commonwealth Games. And then there's different subgroups under that. But that's the one that has this Crown Jewels title, which I just love the top fact it's got Crown Jewels attached to it, which is hilarious in itself. But because of that legacy of that framework, I guess it basically limits where the other properties that the other broadcasters we're talking about would start to invest further and further, because where does the BBC make its money? If it's only making it from licensing fees primarily in the UK, the rest of its funding that it generates is from international work that it does. So it sells its work to other studios internationally. There might be some revenue that it generates through advertising through its international channels, but it's not that significant in comparison to its income it generates domestically through government funding and the licensing model. It's not going to be spending money willy-nilly on media rights is my point. It's always going to be the commercial organizations that are going to fund the bulk of sports rights in this market.
And on the flip side, if you're DAZN, how concerning is this? Granted, we're talking about one single market as a part of a global deal. It's not like they don't have other deals in place. You already said they've secured one in the US, which, just one of the biggest markets out there. How much of their success is going to be based on what they can successfully do from a sub-licensing perspective, and if this becomes a more common trend?
Well, you got to think, right? Remember how late this deal was done? It's only announced a few months ago. It took quite a lot of time for the FIFA to finally find someone that would basically backed the project to the level it wanted. And who knows the real reasons for it. Maybe DAZN think its value is as they've paid for it. Lots speculate that with all the money coming from Saudi Arabia and other investments, and the fact that the World Cup's basically set to be in the kingdom in the future, there's a lot of people speculating as to how and why this decision was made. But let's just, on good faith, say that DAZN thought this was worth the amount of money they're putting on the table. They've only got a few months then to maximize its value of the rights they have. And there's no way they'd be able to do that purely through using their own channels wholly and solely. So from what I'm hearing is that they're basically working frantically, basically like a good old-fashioned media rights agency, going market to market. And think about how many markets there are in the world, selling to each and every country's set of broadcasters to try and maximize the revenue opportunity and the reach of it. Now, there's no doubt there's a mandate from FIFA as well to make sure it's the Club World Cup is in as many places as possible. And there's also a mandate, no doubt, from the zone to make sure they maximize the revenue opportunity. So, there's probably, I don't know, they've got this set up in the DAZN offices, but there's probably like $1 billion price tag, and they're chopping it down every deal they've done. And then at the end, hopefully they go past that 0 point and they can have some nice profit at the other end of it. But it's a grind. They've got to go to 200 markets. What I'm hearing is that all of the top senior people are going out to market and literally going out one by one to the broadcasters selling these rights and trying to get deals done right across the world. So a lot of work to be done before this tournament kicks off, but they're well on the way with some really good deals, and no doubt doing a deal with like TNT and Warner Brothers Discovery in the US is a great starting point, but expect to see just a host of new announcements coming flooding over the next couple of months as they finalize those deals before the big event.
Well, like I said, it's a story that we will continue to follow, and we'll follow the fallout of it as well. So this won't be the last time that we speak about it, but switching from one soccer league to another, and another one, I guess you could say, who's had a trying to think of the word to do this sort of a tone setting type of deal is the MLS. There's quite a lot of news with the international deal that they did with Apple, and they're trying to expand. And similar to the Club World Cup, that even though they have the deal with Apple, it's not fully exclusive to some degree. They have partners in the US to be able to show their games, but they're now also putting together a Sunday night soccer package, and they're looking to expand those deals internationally to not just exclusively live on their on the Apple platform. So Nick, I think the idea that MLS was probably big enough to drive everybody to a single Apple platform, we knew was never quite going to be the case. That's why they have some of these other deals. But it now looks like, and we also know they've done some stuff with OneFootball, and now they're also now looking to expand their Sunday night soccer package. They've got things in Germany, Israel, South Korea, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, this Sunday night soccer package. So be curious just to get your thoughts on this sort of expanded opportunity. It almost to a degree sounds like the NFL, where they just carve out little packages of what exists to try to sell that as its own standalone product. What are your takeaways from this?
Yeah, I'm just really interested I think I say that a lot, really interested, but I wonder what Apple thought and actually what the plan has always been. So was it originally, we are just going to hyper paywall and gate this and hope we drive everyone to watch the MLS through Apple channels right across the globe? Was that always the plan, or were they trying to be patient and say, hey, we're going to launch with this, make it seem like this is the only way to get access to the MLS, drive as many subscribers as we can early on with the hype of the Messi train, and then start to relax and try and get more distribution, more reach, and again, a bit kind of like the DAZN situation, like trying to maximize the value of those rights a little bit further. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, at least the MLS the benefit of the doubt, to say they probably had this always in their back, the back of their minds as a step for them. Whether it was always planned out is what I'm not too sure about. But one thing I am pretty confident in saying is that the Messi movement with the MLS is going to come to an end pretty soon. He's going to leave or retire or whatever the case may be. Has he announced his retirement? I can't remember if he's announced his retirement.
The only big major news I know is that Kevin De Bruyne will be stepping away from Man City, and it's rumored he will be going to join Messi at Inter Miami. There's apparently some sort of player discoverability clause in the MLS where you can, rank your top five. I don't know how in the world a team with Lionel Messi somehow has top rights in this. I don't know what the discoverability, just player discover processes. I try to look it up. I don't get it. I just don't understand how a team with Lionel Messi, it's like being fantasy football. How's a team with Lionel Messi have the number one spot on the waiver wire? Like, I don't get it. But no, I'm not aware that Messi has said publicly his retirement yet.
Yeah, and I'm curious again. I remember debating this when the Messi deal was first done, is who would be the ideal follow-up act? Yeah, because even with Messi, as great as he is, and he is probably the exception, you want, I mean, ideally, America loves a star, more than as well as they want. You want someone who's a media personality, a media darling, like basically a Beckham, a modern era Beckham, but in the top echelon. And I remember trying to debate, was I debating with you or debating with someone else? Maybe it was like Tom Bassam or someone,
sounds like
former
Bassam.
editor. Trying to work out who would be the next big star you would bring from other markets that have that inertia, that movement. And it could be the face of the league for the years. Because even though Messi he doesn't talk much in the media because his English isn't at the level where he's comfortable. So anyway, so my point basically back to it all is that this window now, while he's still there, he's still driving audiences. There is a bit of momentum behind it. The World Cup's coming. They had to go to market now. They had to go do these deals now, because the risk is that in a year or two, the market might not be there if the ratings do flop a little bit or flatline a little bit for them. So I'm no surprise they're going out to market. It was almost inevitable. I think everyone in the industry who's been around sports media expected it to happen at some stage. The thing is, like, Apple as a platform, as a product, as a brand isn't strong in every country in the world. In some markets it's massive, but some markets it's all about Android. When I lived in my days in Jamaica, there was no Apple store there. There was next to nowhere you could even buy an iPhone. It was all Android all the way. Now, granted, it's a developing market, but it's one of many developing countries where the MLS would be appealing to people. If there's, there was some, for example, there were some Jamaican players who are playing in the MLS. There are people who would absolutely love to watch him, but they wouldn't even understand the concept of why would I need to go sign up to Apple TV when many people probably don't even have a smart TV in that market. There's a lot of question marks and holes. It's a very leaky bucket, I think, is really how I would describe that approach. But now with expanding these linear partnerships across the world, that will definitely mitigate some of those losses and keep the MLS brand alive and being talked about a lot more than it would be otherwise.
We hope you're enjoying this episode of StreamTime Sports. This episode is brought to you by our partners at Kanto. Content is the MVP of the sports world. Whether it's engaging fans, building brands, or driving revenue, it's a game changer. But keeping up with the demands of instant platform-ready content, that's a tough play. Enter Kanto. Kanto's industry-leading digital asset management platform calms the chaos of managing sports content. From AI-powered searching of matchday photos and rapid creation of B-roll videos for social media, to giving sponsors, players, and agents quick, easy access to branded assets, Kanto keeps your team focused on the action. Just ask Maserati Racing, NASCAR, or British Fencing. They've streamlined workflows, boosted fan engagement, and strengthened sponsored relationships with Kanto in their corner. Ready to level up your content game? Visit Kanto.com today. So one of the last story we're going to cover here, Nick, and you brought this up, and I think it's interesting for a couple different reasons, and we're actually going to talk about the world of track and athletics. And within the U.S., there was a statement recently made by the Diamond League chief executive, Peter Stastny. I'll do my best. I'm not good with names. We learned that in the last episode as well. But we've got multiple athletics competitions taking place with Grand Slam track and Diamond League. And, I think one of the things that's interesting here, Nick, we spoke about, was it Major League Volleyball about a couple months back saying that they wanted to launch, but there's already another volleyball league. I don't think this is quite at the same level as PGA Tour and Live Golf sort of thing, but starting to see some of these other leagues popping up. And I think with track and field, where it's a bit different is historically, like, I know World Athletics hosts different events, but it's really about the Olympics. And it's what do you do in those 4 years in between to build that up? And I think having more events is good for the athletes, more opportunities, more exposure. But at the same time, Nick, be curious, with track and field, is it Pete says competition is a good thing if done correctly and schedules aren't overlapping each other, because it sounds like there's a bit of cannibalization going on. But do you think that's actually the case for a sport of this level? Is competition, in fact, a good thing?
So, I mean, competition is a good thing, but I think the tricky part here is at the moment, there's a few sports, right, that are all built around, to your point, like around the Olympic movement. Like that is not only the proverbial crown jewel of athletics, but it's basically everything. There's a bunch of people that come and go as world champs, and their stardom, depending on the market they are from or the country they're from, can wane pretty quickly if they don't get that Olympic crown to back up the years and years potentially of leading a sport. The competition side, I think it takes you back to almost like, how would I put this? I think what the key interesting part of this is, getting away from the media bit and going more towards, can they create events that have wow factor and excitement? Because actually, if you go to an athletics event, I've been to a couple over the years, they can be exciting for the right events, but if they don't have the right stardom, they don't have the right names, they don't have the right pace, they can be quite lackluster at experience. If you're not, sure, there's exceptions if you're at the Olympics and there's 90,000 people cheering and roaring for something going on, but that's an exception rather than the rule. And actually, if you watch these types of events on broadcast, which I have over the years, they're okay to watch, but if you don't know the athletes, you don't follow their stories, or you don't know of the competitive, say, stories between some of the stars, like they do, like a Noah Lyles has sort of generated his own brand and a name, which I think does help massively for something like the 100 meters to make it more of an interest again. The sport can really struggle to cut through. So I think this Grand Slam approach is trying to basically bring to life again the live events experience, that you add a little bit of stardust, a little bit of production, some money to incentivize the athletes, and you have a nice mix. I would go and watch a bunch of those types of things if it was a nice short period of time, a 2-hour stint, a window of stuff where it was all happening, and there was a lot on the line. If you go to the Olympics, normally you'll get a bunch of heats, a bunch of non-essential, non-medal winning events going on, and then there's a few that will happen, and they're the ones that get everyone excited about. But you know what I mean? Like there's if you have an event that's concentrated, well put together, well scheduled, everything matters, you have these tentpole moments of pressure and intensity, I could see why that would be really interesting, and I could see why it would be therefore a good product for digital media versus trying to lean into the legacy model. But you would be looking at more of an approach, in my view, of, okay, you handpick your athletes for all competitions you want. You wouldn't be following let's say the more authentic, or how would I put it? The more authentic approach, which is, you have a bunch of heats to get into the finals, and then you have a winner. So therefore you have potentially 30, 40 representatives trying to make the 100-meter final. In these environments, if you can just limit it to just the best of the best, I think there's got to be a huge appetite for it.
So I agree with you in terms of where track and field is and sort of where it's competing against. I think the part that's actually worth us maybe diving a little bit more into, because it's not just limited to track and field, this is going to be an argument that all sports are going to have, is when you start looking into their media approach. So Diamond League is found on Flow Sports, which is a paid streaming service. We spoke about Flow last week with their investment from Dream Sports. And, it's approximately $30 a month or $150 for an annual subscription. And this has apparently been called out by athletes such as Gabby Thomas, saying like, hey, being on a paywall is not good for us. Whereas if we look at Grand Slam Track, which I forgot to mention, is co-founded by Michael Johnson, famous U.S. Olympian, their broadcast deal is on NBC Peacock streaming service, which is a significantly lower price point, but it's also on the CW, which is a free-to-air channel. So they have taken different approaches within how they go about distributing their content. But I thought what was really interesting, really true, was Stastny's comment from Diamond League, which is, yes, I would love free to air, but the reality is we're looking at 32 to 33 hours of competition that's available. The reality is free to air broadcasters, there's only so much real estate if we want to think about it in that sense. And you've got to convince someone of that 32 hours you have that it's better than the 32 hours of something else they could put on that linear channel. And does that actually drive as much revenue? Because obviously you still need that revenue to grow it. And there's that whole argument of reach versus revenue. And these two organizations have taken different paths. But I also think it's interesting his point being like, yeah, I would love to be on free to air, but that doesn't mean someone is going to be willing to provide me a home to do so.
Big fundamental, profound.
I was gonna say that's me putting words in his mouth, but like that's sort of what I get from that comment.
But that is the conundrum of sports and where it's gone through, and we've seen over time, ultimately those that have chased the biggest check has come with a sacrifice of audience engagement and mass awareness. The tricky bit, I think, when you're looking at athletics, is there's different pockets, like every sport, of audiences. There's people who are obsessed, who live and breathe athletics, who, you could define different groups. I could say there's if you go to, actually, you wouldn't believe this, but the biggest event in Jamaica every year was the high school college athletics championships. Bigger than any football match, bigger than anything else, because I don't know. There's so much riding on basically these athletes getting through. I guess I'm not too sure, and everyone's family is going to watch them. I'm not too sure, but there are pockets. My point is, there are pockets globally and domestically where fans want to be super served athletics related content, and that's where a premium proposition is valuable. The problem is if you put all your eggs in that basket, and that I think is the ultimate problem here. And Diamond League probably didn't have much of a choice. Whether it's Flow Sports or anyone else coming to the table. We're willing to pay you for these rights, but we'll take them all because we don't want to lose audiences to a free-to-air platform where you want to have, say, the finals of the 100 meters made available to get mass reach. Like it's a supply and demand conundrum that they've got on that front. And then people will be complaining about the checks that they're getting for winning races, and if they go down the full reach play. And that's why, and it is a good question. I think the modern day question now is actually, do you just accept, and I think we've talked about this before, but if you accept no media rights check upfront, but just the biggest possible reach made available, whatever the method, and then it's up to the athletes and it's up to everyone else to maximize that awareness, that visibility through their own methods and channels, because now they can do that a lot more than they ever could through creating their own media businesses, just through social media, going out and selling partnerships and visibility, which you give them more freedom than, say, the Olympics do in terms of brand visibility. Because obviously that's one of the challenges with the Olympics is you might compete at the Olympics, but you can't show any of the brands you really are attached to because of all the heavy policing on IP there. Maybe that would be enough. And maybe you allow some of the athletes to have some of the live and near live rights available to give them more visibility, more audience growth, and let them make money that way from it. It's a conundrum. It's tricky because no one in this world I've ever heard say, yes, let's accept less money willfully and happily and leave it to the athletes to make the money. And the athletes are like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. But I think we'll get there at some stage down the line once the monetization machine of like social media and YouTube and those platforms continues to become more and more robust and trusted.
Agreed. And I think what you're seeing with the Kings and Queens League, what you're seeing with the Ballers League, it won't happen in a formal sport to start off, but you would think that these types of leagues that are more driven by star power and influence in terms of follower numbers on TikTok, Instagram, if those sorts of disruptor leagues can show that you don't need the broadcast deal and you can really rely on the individual talent to drive that. Like, I feel like that's almost sort of the test bed, and you see if that maybe actually trickles into the more mainstream media.
Yeah, I think they are the test bed. They are what everyone's hoping is unlocking this new approach, this new way of doing things. The jury is still well and truly out on those types of approaches because they're trying a shortcut, and that's using creators and entertainment first over true sport. And so therefore, will true sports be able to unlock an entertainment-like approach to it? And that's where I do think you almost need to have two different propositions. I think the Diamond League trying to sort of, it can't be a half-hearted version of the Grand Slam track. Yeah, it can't be a half-hearted version of that. It has to be all in, because it can lose its identity. Because Diamond League is supposed to be serving the world of athletics. Not just the best of the best. I mean, that is a bit of it, but it's supposed to be making sure it's accessible to, if you're the best runner from somewhere, I don't know, in Africa, you've got a genuine chance just because you're fast to be able to compete in that event. And I bet you the Grand Slam track and these other competitions, you can be one of the better runners and potentially a viable option. But if you don't have the star power, the US centric audience where the media world's driven, you're not going to get that chance to race in it. And that's why they both need to exist. They both need to find their place. But if they try and be a bit of too much of each other, then that's where they lose their value in the eyes of the audiences.
Yes. Well, like I said, it's just interesting, just given the way that the two organizations have taken their different media approaches, whether they end up some sort of joint coming together. It's something we'll follow. But I think it was those comments made like, hey, would love to be free to air, but it doesn't fit for us, that I thought made it an interesting debate to have, because that is a choice other organizations will have to make.
So it is. I think the challenge, your point is a really important one. I think the challenge, we've seen every disruptor come to market. Things like the ISL, the International Swimming League, was a really exciting proposition. Disruptive, more money for athletes, more innovative approach. I haven't heard that talked about. I don't even know if it exists anymore. Had a pretty eccentric person who was running it. Anything that's disruptor-like can disrupt the approach that's being taken. But for it to be viable, the only one I can think of at the moment is the golf situation with Live Golf kicking on, and this conundrum about whether or not they're going to end up joining up or not with PGA Tour. But that's a whole other ball game. So, yeah, we'll have to wait and see if it works out. But I think it clearly needs some disruption. That's for sure. The whole athletic space.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, like you said, with Live Golf as well, like you mentioned there, Nick, where that'll go, whether that becomes a precedent or if it ends up just being kind of a one-off situation. But Nick, it's been a fun episode diving into some different things this week. Lots of, I know you keep using the word interesting, but it's very true. And I think what I've noticed in some recent episodes, Nick, is we're following up on stories. They're not just one-offs. The Club World Cup is something we've been talking about for a little bit. The MLS Apple deal is something we've been following a little bit. So I've noticed there's some of these thematics that we keep following these stories as they evolve and more information comes out, and to see the directions they went compared to where we started. So I'm actually kind of enjoying that.
Yeah, I think it's good if we can continue to add more layers and depth to the stories as they develop, and then we learn, and hopefully people listening learn as well. And that's all part of the fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, everyone, I appreciate you joining us, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
Now, before you go, if you liked what you heard today, be sure to rate and review, and just let me know what you think on social. You can find me on most social platforms as SportsPro Nick. And please do spread the word of the podcast. There's no better way of marketing than word of mouth, whether that be in person or on social media. And if you don't like what you've heard, or you think we should be doing more or less of something, then reach out and let me know, as I'd love to hear from you. Thanks, Streamtimers. Until next time.